Establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, you delightful people. Welcome along to Neil Oliver Live. Coming up tonight on the show, we'll be talking all about artificial intelligence, whatever that is. Is it something we should be embracing or should we be fearful of the consequences? As well as looking at the loss of human contact due to AI, we will also be examining the potential benefits it could be bringing us, as well as discussing the need for proper regulation. And finally, an iconic rock in the Yorkshire Dales is going on the market for just 150,000 of your earth pounds. You can't build on Kilnsey Crag, but you can run up it and climb up it, and it's been painted by GMW Turner. We'll be hearing much more about one of Yorkshire's best-known landmarks, which has been described as a genuinely unique opportunity. All of that and more coming up, but first, an update on the latest news from Aaron Armstrong.
Good evening to you. It's 6:01 here in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister is facing calls for a general election following the announcement of a third Tory resignation. Nigel Adams, the MP for Selby and Ainsty, says he's standing down with immediate effect, triggering another by-election. Boris Johnson announced his resignation yesterday after being contacted by the committee investigating whether he misled Parliament. The ex-Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries stepped down shortly after. Shadow Deputy Leader Angela Rayner says it's clear the former Prime Minister lied.
Boris Johnson has shown himself to be a coward once more. You know, he's not held his hands up to and taken responsibility as he should do. The Privileges Committee, a well-respected committee that are made up majority of Tory MPs, and he's just tried to trash them and say, I've got no responsibility, I've done nothing wrong. He's a man that can never hold his hands up to what he's done, and I think it's an absolute disgrace, and, you know, good riddance. He shouldn't have been in Parliament in the first place.
And there are mixed feelings about Boris Johnson's resignation in his constituency.
He's actually done a good thing for the constituency in resigning, because I think it opens it for somebody that can come in and do a better job for us.
I wouldn't say I'm pleased. I think, isn't government more than one man? Shouldn't we be doing more than just going after individuals?
I loved him as a character and I thought he was great, so it's sad.
A 16-year-old boy has been charged with 2 counts of attempted murder and 1 count of grievous bodily harm after an attack at a private school in Devon. Police who were called to Blundell School in Tiverton around 1 o'clock yesterday morning say 3 people, including 2 students, sustained multiple serious injuries. The boy is in a critical condition and the other is said to be serious but stable. A second man has been arrested in connection with the disappearance of a woman in County Antrim. 21-year-old Chloe Mitchell was last seen in Ballymena a week ago. Around 70 to 80 volunteers with the Community Rescue Service were involved in a major search of the area today, with teams concentrating on thick undergrowth on the banks of the River Braid. A 34-year-old is now being questioned after a 26-year-old man was arrested in Lurgan on Thursday. Prosecutors say a British girl stabbed in the French Alps will be able to leave hospital in the next few days. The 3-year-old was on holiday with her parents when she and 3 other young children were attacked in a playground in the town of Annecy on Thursday. 2 pensioners were also injured. Prosecutors confirmed the victims are no longer in a critical condition. A 31-year-old Syrian refugee facing attempted murder charges has been remanded in custody. At least 4 troops fainted in the heat during the Colonel's Review in central London. Thousands of people were at Horse Guards Parade, watching as Prince William assessed the event that's ahead of Trooping the Colour next Saturday. He later acknowledged the difficult conditions, paying tribute to those who took part. The Met Office has confirmed temperatures in the UK reached 30 degrees for the first time this year, with 30.5 recorded at Heathrow. GB News understands plans to house asylum seekers on a ship near Liverpool have been abandoned. A government source told us the vessel, which was due to house 500 men, will no longer be used following objections from Peel ports. Meanwhile, Italy's Ministry of Defence has released video of a Turkish ship that was hijacked by armed illegal migrants trying to reach Europe. Italian special forces stormed the vehicle yesterday. After nearly 7 hours, regained control of the ship and detained 15 people. Officials say the 22 members of the crew were released. None were seriously injured. An extra £16 million of humanitarian aid being sent to southern Ukraine following the collapse of a dam. The government says the money will be used to help around 32,000 people in the Kherson region whose homes were flooded after the blast. Ukraine's blamed Russia for the attack, which Moscow denies. And Manchester City are on the verge of making history in the Champions League final later. If they beat Inter Milan, City will become just the 2nd English team, after Manchester United, to complete a League, FA Cup and European treble. Live pictures here of those City fans making their way to the Ataturk Stadium in Istanbul, some 20,000 of them ready for kick-off at 8 p.m. City have never won the Champions League. Inter, the underdogs, last lifted the trophy in 2010. We will keep you up to date with that score as we go through the evening. Now, it's back to Neil.
Whatever happened to the pursuit of happiness, and for that matter, to the inalienable right of people, all of whom are created equal, to lives of their choosing and to freedom itself? Whatever happened to government by the people, of the people and for the people? We hear those words and think of the United States of America, specifically the Declaration of Independence in 1776 and the Gettysburg Address in 1863. The Declaration of Independence was the work of men descended from those who had fled tyranny in the Old World in search of a better beginning somewhere new. The Gettysburg Address was delivered by President Abraham Lincoln in the aftermath of a hellish battle of that New World's Civil War, a war that challenged whether any nation dedicated to freedom and equality could long endure. It was the pertinent question in 1863, and it's pertinent now. Both realisations were the consequence of great suffering and of the prevailing certainty in human hearts that better times must lie ahead. Those words are enshrined in the context of the United States of America, but by the 18th and 19th centuries, the thinking that gave birth to them was already old. The understanding that all human beings are created equal and free is eternal. Inalienable is a word worth pausing to consider. It refers to that which cannot be given, nor taken away, nor surrendered. Inalienable rights are those we are born with. They're not given to us by any person, and they cannot be taken from us by any person. Most importantly, we cannot give away our inalienable rights, even if we want to. The sky is blue, the sea is wet, and we are born equal and free, entitled to life and the pursuit of happiness. The founding fathers of the USA declared those truths self-evident, which is a way of saying that everyone knows as much anyway, without needing to be told. And so I ask again, what has happened to the pursuit of happiness? When and by what means did the functionaries, being the elected servants of government that must only ever be by, of and for the people, find the audacity to seek to set aside their sworn responsibility to protect the inalienable rights of the people? Government exists to make it possible for free, equal people to make the most of life and, by so doing, to pursue happiness, their own and that of others. When did those functionaries of government take it upon themselves to pretend they might deny people the innate freedom of the lives into which they were born and the pursuit of happiness which those lives make not just possible, but necessary? Back in 2020, they had the gall to try and shut us in our homes. Such draconian steps had never been contemplated by any government flunky. Always the policy proposed in the face of disease had been about protecting the vulnerable and leaving the rest to go about our lives. And yet one glance at doom-laden computer modelling by statisticians in Imperial College London, and our public servants started drooling at the prospect of locking us down, treatment normally meted out only to unruly prisoners already in jail. A report published this month by the London-based Institute of Economic Affairs, based on real numbers from the real world rather than upon the fantasies of minor technocrats, has found lockdowns were, quote, a global policy failure of gigantic proportions. Such are the consequences of seeking to steal freedom. While Imperial College London, led by arch-fantasist Professor Neil Ferguson, had airily predicted lockdowns would save 2 million lives in the US and 400,000 in the UK, real-world numbers now make plain that that devastating, inhumane, criminally reckless policy of isolation and incarceration that upended the world and destroyed the lives of millions avoided 6,000 deaths in the whole of Europe and 4,000 in the US. Government functionaries here and in the US and around the world sought to steal our freedom and disregard our inalienable rights, and now their claimed justification for so doing has been revealed as utterly, utterly bogus. Some might say, I would say, that it was all a premeditated pack of lies, shaped not in the name of protecting health, but in the name of seizing control of society itself. The barefaced lying and hypocrisy are all around us. In April, at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, Joe Biden declared, quote, journalism is not a crime. He said he believed in the First Amendment, which is to say freedom of speech. He called for the release of US citizens wrongly detained abroad, journalists included. That was big of him, because here in Britain this week, Australian journalist Julian Assange lost his appeal against being extradited to the US for publishing classified documents in the public interest and in the best traditions of journalism. Biden says journalism is not a crime, while his agents do his bidding in seeking to seize and to pull into a dark hole from which none might escape a journalist whose journalism he plainly considers criminal. I very much doubt that Joe Biden knows that the concept of the pursuit of happiness likely travelled to the US from my homeland of Scotland. Francis Hutcheson, Professor of Moral Philosophy at Glasgow University during the Scottish Enlightenment, taught his students that, quote, that action is best which accomplishes the greatest happiness for the greatest numbers, and that worst which in like manner occasions misery. Misery, the misery of the mass of the population, has, in my opinion, been not just the inevitable consequence of the policies we've been made to endure these past 3 years, but the intention. Francis Hutcheson believed individual happiness was a benefit experienced by a person working first to increase the happiness of those around him or her. One of his students was John Witherspoon, who crossed the Atlantic to become president of Princeton University. Witherspoon was a signatory of the Declaration of Independence, and it's reasonable to think the presence of that line about the pursuit of happiness was his gift, and thanks ultimately to Hutcheson. But here, rather than happiness, government flunkies sowed the seeds of dread. The behavioural scientists of the so-called nudge units, the underhand activities of the secret squirrels of the laughably self-named 77th Brigade that spied upon dissent from the official line, all a deliberate and coordinated effort to spread anxiety and fear among the tax-paying, law-abiding people of the land. I say government exists now not to defend the right of the people to pursue happiness, but to deny those rights and so enable the enrichment and advantage of a narrow clique of the wealthiest obsessed with power. The intention at the same time is to make as many of us as possible unhappy and condemned to lesser lives. I say that that clique comprises those most fearful, those afraid of their fellow humankind. So fearful are they of our existence, they would move heaven and earth and everything in between in order to hobble our potential. When we are made to contemplate 15-minute ghettos and no cars and no air travel and no movement without digital IDs and no buying and selling without the approval of more of those government flunkies and their artificial intelligence, when we're told we will own nothing and be happy, that we should accept lives devoid of aspiration, when we're made to contemplate such nonsense, what are we supposed to think has happened to our inalienable right to freedom and to the pursuit of happiness? If you're asking me for the answers to these questions, I say we've been made victims of an attempted theft perpetrated by so-called leaders who are liars. I say they lied throughout the so-called pandemic. I say they lie about the war in Ukraine. I say they lie about the climate. I say they lied about who blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. And it seems to me they're lying now about who blew up the dam in Kherson in southern Ukraine. I say they're lying about the intentions behind the amendments to the WHO Pandemic Preparedness Treaty. They're lying about all of it because lying is what liars do when they've nothing else and nothing left to lose. Except for one MP, being Andrew Bridgen of the Reclaim Party, no one in Westminster will talk about excess deaths past and present. I say this is lying by omission, which is just lying. I say we've not been run by inept people who just kept getting it wrong, rather by liars who told us to do one thing while themselves doing something else. Here and abroad, they tell the same lie at the same time, even when they know we know they're lying, because knowing they're all telling the same lie at the same time at least gives them the reassurance of solidarity in their lying. More and more people are awake to the lying. The last time I checked, 80 million people had turned to former Fox News host Tucker Carlson on his new channel on Twitter, likely in search of information no longer available from mainstream sources. In this time of lying, in this time of the attempted theft of our inalienable right to life and freedom and the pursuit of happiness, we have an important choice to make. We must decide what our values are. For 2,000 years and more, the West has been built around the belief that the highest achievement of the universe is humankind. A person raised within that tradition used to regard respect for humankind, the sanctity of humankind, and love of humankind as the highest values of all. And yet now we tolerate a version of the West in which humankind is fed food that makes humankind ill, is openly exploited by the drugs industry that keeps them ill. Humankind that has freedom and bodily autonomy blatantly ignored, and that must watch war inflicted upon his fellows for no higher goal than the financial gain of the military-industrial complex. We're also watching the mutilation of children in the name of the transgender ideology, which is another lie. Most recently, we have been invited to fear so-called artificial intelligence, told it might supplant us as a species. Then there's the transhumanism that insists we're no longer fit for purpose anyway. Carbon life forms, your time is up. Make way for silicon. And so as never before, we must think about what it means to be human and choose whether we are for humankind, against humankind, or just ambivalent about our chances of continuing to exist at all. I said the thoughts that gave birth to the Declaration of Independence and the sentiments of the Gettysburg Address were ancient by the time they were built into the lower courses of the masonry supporting the United States of America. The American dream remains that, just a dream, while the stated aims of the authors of the Declaration of Independence were aspirations most high, they've never yet been realised. Among those founding fathers were slave owners, so that even those capable of conceiving of a world of equality and freedom for all men and women were nonetheless incapable of living up to their own ideals. It was ever thus, but just because a grand idea has not yet been made real doesn't mean it never can be. Now, when the future of humankind depends upon it, all possible efforts must be made to renew that noble aspiration. A document called the Declaration of Arbroath is on public display in Scotland now. It was written in 1320 and, among other bold pronouncements, declares that while King Robert, the Bruce, had done a grand job, still made plain that if he failed the people, failed to defend their freedoms, those same people would do whatever necessary to be rid of him and to find someone better. Here's the thing, freedom is ours by right, and the pursuit of happiness is ours by right. We've always known as much, in our hearts at least. It was and is, declares the Declaration of Arbroath, not for glory, nor for riches, nor honours that we're fighting, but for freedom alone, which no honest man gives up, but with life itself. That much was true in 1320. It was true in 1776. It's true now. It will always be true. That's my opinion, of course, and you're free to disagree with me. Keep your tweets and emails coming through the show. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tweet me as well @gbnews, and I'll try to get to your comments later in the show. Joining me now is my good friend and fellow GB News presenter, Calvin Robinson. Calvin, what do you think about the pursuit of happiness?
That was powerful stuff, first and foremost. And I was trying to communicate to you during the news break that I hope you'd seen Tucker Carlson's video, and it seems you have, because you mentioned it there. Fantastic truth teller, just like yourself. What do I make of the pursuit of happiness? I've always been wary of that cause, actually, because I think, first of all, it's very American. We've all got to pursue our happiness, and secondly, I've always...
The happiness of others.
But that's the key. I've always found it quite a selfish pursuit, and I think it has been misunderstood, and it has been the root of this self-obsessed ideology of making gods of ourselves and kind of making the world centre around ourselves. But you quoted the Scotsman who said, actually, the pursuit of happiness, or happiness, is a byproduct of the pursuit of happiness of other people, increasing other people's happiness. That is the key. Contributing to society is how we get contentness, how we feel fulfilled, by being a part of the community and giving something back. And happiness is a result of that. But if we pursue our own selfish desires, our own selfish happiness, that's a never-ending goal that we can never achieve.
I think happiness is responsiveness to everything around us. I think that's where it comes from. And I think, you know, and I think sadness gets a bad rap. I think there's a missold idea that a kind of consumer-based, everything you want, whenever you want happiness is the only happiness worth having. And it's an empty void.
It leads to consumerism.
And actually, responding to and experiencing all of life and all of humanity and all that humanity means that's the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah, and it's a trap. It's the pursuit of happiness. It's not happiness in and of itself, because sometimes we might never achieve that happiness, but we might feel fulfilled in our lives. We might feel contentness with our family, with our friends, with our community. It's not the same as that happiness.
But do you think, as I do, that somewhere along the line, those within government have forgotten that it's their responsibility to make life better, to facilitate the improvement and the betterment of people's life and happiness, and yet they seem to have set themselves upon making everybody miserable?
I wouldn't say it's their job to make life better. I'd say it's their job to stay out of our way so that we can make our lives better. Their job is to protect what we have, and you're right to use the word inalienable rights. I love that, because human rights are abstract. Human rights don't make much sense. They're what we've plucked out of the air from the UN Convention. But inalienable rights are God-given rights, God-ordained rights, such as the right to life, such as the right to private property. These are things that we all have as human beings, and you're right that no government can ever take them away from us.
Yes, indeed. Well, coming up, we'll be joined by Matthias Desmet, a professor in clinical psychology in Ghent University in Belgium, who's concerned that the use of artificial intelligence is meaning we lose much-needed emotional contact.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway, Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Radio.
Welcome back to Neil Oliver Live. Now, more and more we hear talk of artificial intelligence, AI, and transhumanism. For some, the advance of such technology, seemingly faster and faster every day, poses an existential threat to humanity as a species. Are we in danger of being overwhelmed and even replaced by machines unimaginably smarter than us? During the past 3 years, we were told to trust the science. Science and technology would save us, and anyone questioning that science or that technology was dismissed by the authorities and by the mainstream media that served them as stupid and downright dangerous. Has society been captured by scientists and technocrats, and should we regard the technological future they propose as a heaven or a hell? Joining me to discuss the double-edged sword of technology, AI and transhumanism, is Matthias Desmet, Professor of Clinical Psychology at Ghent University in Belgium. Are you there, Matthias?
Yes, here I am, Neil.
Great to see you, Matthias. I'll get straight into it because time's always against us. Do you think humanity stands at a fork in the road?
Yes, I do think so. I think you can choose for a further mechanization of the world, to use even more technology, to replace our natural environment by a digital environment, a digicosmos. Or we can start to realize that maybe the destiny of the human being is not a kind of a technological paradise or a technological society, but rather the resonance with what we could call the eternal forms of nature, the eternal language of nature. That's two opposite directions we can go in. And I think, to be honest, that the major part of society will choose for the first direction, will be enticed to believe that technology will be the only solution to the problems we are facing now and all the crises we are facing. And that there will be a smaller group who will feel that there is something wrong with this utopian technological paradise, and that no matter what happens, we have to go in another direction. So I truly believe we are at the point where we will have to choose, yes.
Why do you think so many, scientists included, but also in the general population, seem to have lost faith with what it is to be human, as though to be human is not enough?
That's a very good question. Well, you know, I think that in a certain way, this technocratic, transhumanist ideology, which seizes control of society now, is a logical consequence of our view on man and the world. You know, like somewhere back in the 16th century, when the modern sciences started to emerge, we increasingly started to think of the universe as a kind of a large machine, a set of elementary particles which all interact according to the laws of mechanics with each other, constituting a large mechanical device, a large machine which can be perfectly understood, controlled and manipulated in a rational way. And once you start from that view on man and the world, once you believe that the universe essentially is a large machine and the human being a small machine in the large machine, then it's only logical that you think that experts, engineers who know the machine of the universe, of society and of the human being very well, should lead society. Why would a democratically elected politician lead a mechanical society? So I think that the root cause of the problems, and the reason why so many people believe that if we want to overcome the crisis we find ourselves in now, that we should move to a more technological society, and that we should move to a transhumanist society in which the human being becomes a kind of a cyborg, which is optimized by merging with all kinds of technological devices, and in which society ultimately should become an internet of bodies. I think that's only a logical consequence of the dominant view on man and the world, this mechanist view on man and the world. And if we want to change something, if we want to be capable of conceiving a different future for the human being, then we will have to change something about this view on man and the world. We will have to think why or in what way we can overcome this mechanist view on man and the world. And actually the sciences showed us already very clearly that the universe is not a big machine, and that the mechanical thinking is very limited in understanding what the world is. So the strange thing is that while this mechanist view on man and the world imposes itself as a scientific view on man and the world, it is not at all. Science shows us something else. Science shows us that our rational understanding is never capable of grasping the essence of life around us, of grasping the essence of nature, of grasping the essence of the human being. So, in a certain way, I believe that that's exactly the challenge we are facing.
Matthias, I've got in the studio with me Calvin Robinson, who's a faith leader, man of the church, and I know that he has a question he'd like to ask you.
Hi, Matthias. As we head full speed towards artificial intelligence and transhumanism, my question would be, where is God in all of this?
That's a very good question. It's clear that in a materialist universe, and if you think that the universe is merely a material system in which there are only molecules and atoms, there is no God to be found in such a universe. The seminal scientists who, of the 20th century, all left that materialist universe behind, and in a certain way, almost all of them reintroduced the concept of God. I don't say that it was the same God as the God of institutionalized dogmatic religion, but in any case, they believed it was necessary to introduce the concept of God again. I think everything, again, depends on our view on man and the world. As long as we prefer to believe that we live in a mechanistic universe, I guess we will be estranged of any concept of God whatsoever.
Matthias, the question asked before about basically, why we had so many people, scientists included, had lost faith in what it is to be human. Do you think it comes to some extent from a loss of meaning in people's lives? That the rational, the scientific, 250 years of science, having in an unexpected way made many people's lives devoid of meaning?
Yes, of course. Yes, life is by definition meaningless in a mechanistic universe. Of course, the machine goes around without any meaning or purpose. But there is another reason why it led to the loss of meaning, namely this mechanist thinking led to the industrialization of the world, the use of more and more technology, and this in its turn, in a strange way, led to more and more loneliness. That's something very remarkable. The more the world is industrialized, the more technology is used, the more people feel lonely. Like in Great Britain, which is one of the most industrialized countries in the world, Theresa May, I believe, appointed a minister of loneliness because she acknowledged the extent of the problem of loneliness. And this, in its turn, once people feel lonely, they are typically confronted with a lack of meaning making, with a lot of free-floating anxiety, frustration, and aggression. And this makes them extremely vulnerable for propaganda. And that means that, in the end, what is created in our world constantly is a population which is completely in the grip of propaganda, which is like a blind ally of the people who use the propaganda and who weaponize all kinds of narratives to push the population in the direction of a more and more technocratic, transhumanist society.
Is science now a tool of politics? Has science and have scientists lost their way?
Well, at least there is a huge problem with what we believe to be science now, to represent science. If you look at, I don't know if you're familiar with the so-called replication crisis in the academic world. Well, around 2005, it was shown that up to 85% of the research papers in the medical field, where the problem was worse, are not reproducible, which means, from a scientific point of view, that they are more or less meaningless, that they are completely without meaning. So that shows us something of that there is something wrong with what we believe to be the science now. And indeed, what is clear is that, for instance, in the corona crisis, that science became more and more politicized and was used for purposes that were in the end not scientific at all.
I'm going to ask you to hold that thought, Matthias. You stay with us through the 3 minutes of the break and we will pick up this conversation. But as I say, I have to get to a break. Back in 3 minutes.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, The People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, The People's Channel, Britain's watching.
News channel.
On Mark Dolan tonight in My Big Opinion, my reflections on Boris Johnson's departure. A talented but flawed character, his report card is a mixed one. So overall, is it a thumbs up or thumbs down? Find out at 9. In my Take at 10, you don't have to wait for the judge. I'll be giving my verdict on Prince Harry's needless war against the British press. Does Donald Trump really face 100 years in jail? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker Kinsey Schofield, live from the United States. TV star Kim Woodburn will be giving her forthright views on Holly Willoughby's return to the This Morning sofa. And let me tell you, sparks will fly. We're live from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Neil Oliver Live, where we're talking with Professor Matthias Desmet about all things artificial intelligence and transhumanist. Matthias, I trust you're still with me. Matthias, I don't want this to be a pessimistic item for people listening. I wonder if this moment of artificial intelligence standing where it stands provides humanity with an important opportunity to consider what being human even means.
Definitely. I definitely believe so. I believe that while a lot of human interaction and contact is replaced by digital contact, and even the human being itself is replaced by a digital substitute, we will more and more feel pressed to start to think about what the difference is between the human being and the machine. And I think there is a difference. There really is a difference, because that's so characteristic. Every time we try to replace a natural phenomenon by an artificial phenomenon, such as artificial intelligence, replacing natural intelligence of human intelligence, we see that the artificial phenomenon is very similar, almost identical, that it appears to be almost identical, but that there always is a small difference. That is always the case, even if you create an artificial equivalent of simple mechanical devices, such as a pendulum, you will see that there is a very small difference, that the artificial phenomenon looks very much like the real one, but that this small difference contains the essence of the phenomenon. The essence, the small difference represents the soul of the phenomenon, the essence of the phenomenon. And that's extremely important. Exactly this small aspect of nature, of reality, that cannot be grasped and recreated in a rational way, is the essence of life. And that's what science exactly showed us, that in the end, the essence of all phenomena in nature, and then thinking about complex dynamical systems theory in the first place then, that the essence of the phenomena is always irrational, transcends rational understanding. And that's exactly what we will start to notice, that like all the artificial intelligence creatures will be very similar like the natural ones, but there will be a difference, and the human being will experience this small difference. And that's exactly why we will start to look for what this essence is. We will reinvent in these times the essence of the human being.
I love that, Matthias. Calvin, what do you make of that? I think there are so many resonances in what Matthias is saying that speak to heart and soul.
Yeah.
That, you know, that ultimately what artificial intelligence might remind us of is the heart and the soul that will never be replicated by a silicon chip.
Well, that's the key, because what are we as human beings? You started this segment asking that question, or saying we're going to have to start thinking about that question. And I think we're two things. We are a body and we are a soul. And we often forget that we're a soul. We focus entirely on our body. This is where the entire trans argument has come from. This idea that we can be in the wrong body and that we have to adjust our body to kind of find our true selves. No, we are our body and we are our soul. We can't separate the two. That's how we were designed.
Matthias, it seems, I wish I had more time, I always want more time, but it seems to me there is something hopeful in this, that artificial intelligence will bring us face to face with what it is to be human. And as you say, it's that invisible, unreachable essence that science will never touch.
Yes, exactly. I think, in the end, maybe one of the most important differences between the human being and the machine might be the fact that the human being is capable of what we would call truth-telling. Truth-telling is a kind of speech which starts from something that we feel inside ourselves and what transcends our rational mind. And when we tell the truth, we speak without thinking. We just say sincerely something that we experience inside of ourselves. And that's something a machine is not capable of. And that's exactly this truth-telling, is a kind of speech which connects people to each other. And as such, it is the real solution to the problems we are facing now. In the first place, the loneliness in our society. So I think that's one of the differences between a human being and a machine, that it is capable of truth-telling. And I'm 100% sure that the most fundamental disease of our society now is the fact is propaganda, a new kind of institutionalized lie, which has seized control of public space. And the remedy for propaganda will be truth-telling. And at the same time, it will cure the root cause of our psychological problems, which is loneliness. We could continue for a long time, Neil, but you won't be able to tell it all.
Matthias, I'm so glad I was able to connect with you this evening, and we need to talk more about this. Truth-telling, absolutely, in every walk of life. That's where the answers lie. Thank you, Matthias Desmet from Ghent in Belgium. Thank you. Coming up, would you like to own your very own crag? Not every day you get asked that question. Well, now's your chance. The Kilnsey Crag in the Yorkshire Dales is up for sale. For the guide price of £150,000, you get the famous rock as well as about 19 acres of land. We'll hear about that after the break.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Neil Oliver Live, you fellow travellers. Got a couple of, we've got quite a few bits and pieces of email. I'll read a couple. Betty says, hip hip hooray, both you and Calvin are fantastic. Wish you both were our leaders. I would factor in Matthias Desmet as well. And Ash says, human beings are capable of great things and have wonderful qualities like compassion, empathy and love. But humans are also capable of displaying horrible qualities such as selfishness, greed and cruelty. These horrible qualities are on display by our current rulers for all to see, but we are all free to ignore their dictates and live our lives. Hear, hear. OK, moving on. Kilnsey Crag, a majestic Yorkshire landmark, a giant limestone cliff revered by climbers and fell runners, is up for grabs. The looming, beetling bulk of Kilnsey Crag, all 170 feet of it, together with 19 acres of associated land, was sculpted by the last ice age tens of thousands of years ago. It's featured on countless postcards and photos and was painted by the artist J.M.W. Turner in 1816. Now it could be yours for the princely sum of £150,000. Fell runner Ted Mason joins me now to wax lyrical about what the crag means to him and to the local area. Hi, Ted.
Good evening.
It's quite a sight, Kilnsey Crag. Is there any idea locally why it's up for sale? Why is it on the market?
I think the local farmer must have decided to sell the land. They must be having a bit of a sort out and decided to put it on the market, see what it makes.
As a fell runner, I can imagine you're familiar, brutally familiar with the challenge it poses.
What, the field itself, you mean, or...?
Yeah. Just as part of I believe there's some kind of descent down something they call a chimney, which sounds terrifying.
Oh yeah, there's an annual fell race which I've done about 20 odd times, which runs down the side of the crag, and yeah, it's quite a terrifying race.
Have you ever climbed the crag?
No, I've never been into climbing. I've tried a bit of indoor stuff, but no, it's a very popular climbers site. There's every day I'll go past the crag a couple of times a week, and there's always climbers there. It's a haven for climbers.
And what is the reaction locally? I can imagine something so iconic that literally looms over people's lives being up for sale. Is there an anxiety about who might come in and take it?
Yeah, I think there is a little bit, because I'm involved with the Kilnsey Show, which has the crag race, and we run over that land. Now, it is open access, so it shouldn't affect people going on it, but you do worry who's going to get it and what they're going to try and do. But it's a triple SI land, so it's a site of special scientific interest, so you are restricted on what you can do. But I can't see anyone in agriculture wanting it, because it doesn't really have much value for farming. You know, a big steep cliff isn't an ideal spot to put your sheep or your cows. So, to me, the only person who wants to buy it is just it's like a piece of artwork, I'd suggest. You know, it's just a big lump of artwork in the Dale. Speaking of which, I'm hoping that we do have some images available, or an image available. Oh, look, is that you? I take it that's you, Ted. Yeah, that's me in the race back in the 90s as a 19-year-old, yeah.
And that looming eminence at your back, that's the crag, yes?
Yeah, that's the crag. So that's, as you say, it's 170 feet up, and it protrudes out another 40 feet on an overhang. So it's a real challenge for top climbers, is that crag. I think it was once free climbed by some crazy person. I don't know who it was, but not for me. I just like to run up the side of it.
I think what possibly wasn't really visible there in that photograph is the overhang. When you talk about climbing it, there's a terrifying overhang about it, so you're not going straight up. You're climbing back on your own on your own doom.
Oh yeah. It's steeper than vertical.
Yeah.
So it's a 40-foot backwards climb, but over vertical climb.
And as someone intimately connected to the place, what would you say is that it adds? What does Kilnsey Crag add to that environment in which it sits? What's the atmosphere it generates?
Well, it's just an iconic part of the Dale. You know, if you've been around the Dales, you've heard, of Kilnsey Crag. It's just a spectacular limestone. It comes right into the Dale, so you can't miss it. And the road is literally at the bottom of the crag. So all the Dales, the traffic up the Dales go right under it. So it's a spectacle to see.
For me, it just says something that Turner, one of the most significant artists of any period, made it the focus for one of his works. I think that's probably a stamp of its gravitas.
Oh yeah, there's been many a picture and many a photograph taken of it, and a lot of artists have drawn the crag because it's such an iconic spot.
Ted Mason, thank you very much for that. That's been lovely to have you with us. If I had £150,000 down the back of my couch, I would certainly be up for Kilnsey Crag, but sadly, I think it's going to be beyond me. But if I was going to lay out for something, I'd want something that had mattered so much to so many people for so long that I could just continue to share it with them. That's all we have time for this evening. Thanks to all watching, all my guests. I'll be back next week. Next up is my wonderful guest of earlier this evening, Calvin Robinson.
Good evening, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. Saturday marks the first day since the end of August last year that temperatures rose above 30 degrees Celsius in the UK. We are feeding in this heat from southern southwestern areas of Europe, and it's going to remain quite hot as we move into Sunday as well. Combine that with these occluded fronts helping to pep up showers with outbreaks of rain, moisture and heat means humidity, and it will feel quite sticky for some of us as we head into the overnight period. The showers tending to move northwards into parts of Scotland. They could be heavy in places, generally drier throughout the early hours of Sunday morning for Northern Ireland, Wales and England. But temperatures holding up around the mid to high teens, making it slightly uncomfortable for sleeping in places, and means it will start off on a warm note on Sunday morning as well. The showers across Scotland will continue to push their way northwards, but into the afternoon, once that sunshine develops, we'll see further showers poking off around western areas of England into Wales, across southern parts as well. These could bring some torrential downpours, 30 to 40 millimetres of rain in an hour, and temperatures once again climbing towards that 30 Celsius mark, more towards eastern areas of England now. It will take a little bit of time for those showers to clear their way off. Could still be thundery into the evening time at least, and some localised flooding is possible. They'll tend to die out a bit more as we head into the overnight period, and some clear spells will develop, but could be quite misty and foggy around some coastal areas as well. Another muggy night leads into Monday, and once again it will be a bright and sunny start for many of us, but that sunshine will help to develop those showers, and we'll see them again potentially thundery in places throughout the day. Whilst we'll see further showers on Monday, this area of high pressure is going to start pushing its way in from Scandinavia and settle things down for the middle part of the week. So showers tending to ease their way off, and we'll see more dry conditions and prolonged amounts of sunshine, and temperatures still going to be remaining.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB.